August 7th, 1942. A Mitsubishi A6M Zero tumbled out of the sky over the Solomon Sea. Inside, the pilot was barely alive. A .30 caliber bullet fragment had ripped through the canopy and plunged deep into his skull just above the right eye. The wound was catastrophic. His right eye was destroyed. Blood and brain matter seeped from the gaping hole. Paralysis gripped his left side. Yet in the haze of shock and agony, 25-year-old Petty Officer First Class Saburo Sakai forced his left hand to pull back on the control stick. He was 560 nautical miles from safety. Blinded, bleeding, and half-paralyzed, he began the most incredible flight in aviation history. He would fly for 4 hours and 47 minutes back to Rabaul, defying death itself. This is the true story of the one-eyed samurai of the skies. Saburo Sakai was born on August 25, 1916, into a poor but proud samurai family in Saga Prefecture, Kyushu. The Chikugo River flowed past his home, and as a boy, he absorbed the old code of Bushido. At 11, his mother died, forging in him a fierce independence. At 16, in 1933, he joined the Imperial Japanese Navy at Sasebo. Recruit training was a nightmare of beatings and sleep deprivation. Petty officers beat recruits with wooden rods until they collapsed. Sakai was punched unconscious more than once, but he always stood back up. He endured 4 days without sleep, running miles and carrying heavy equipment. He became a crack shot and was chosen for flight training in 1937. At the Kasumigura Air Training Center, Sakai displayed phenomenal eyesight. He could identify an aircraft miles away. He mastered the Mitsubishi A5M fighter, nicknamed the Claude. Graduating at the top of his class, he joined the 12th Air Group and was sent to China. On May 25, 1938, while escorting bombers, he spotted Soviet-built I-15 biplanes. Sakai dove from the sun, his 7.7 machine guns chattering. The Chinese fighter exploded in flames and cartwheeled into a rice paddy. A bullet struck his buttock, but he flew 300 miles back to base, landing with a blood-soaked seat. That night he wrote, "I have become a true warrior." In the following weeks, he added a second kill, a fast I-16, cementing his reputation as a fearless hunter. When the Pacific War erupted on December 8, 1941, Sakai flew from Tainan Air Base in Formosa, with the first wave to strike Clark Field in the Philippines. At dawn, Zeros roared in low, strafing rows of American P-40s. Sakai caught a Warhawk scrambling and raked it from nose to tail, turning it into a fireball. 2 days later, on December 10th, he intercepted a flight of B-17, flying fortresses from the 14th Bomb Squadron. He latched onto the lead bomber, hammering it with cannon shells, the giant B-17, commanded by Captain Colin P. Kelly Jr., blew apart and smashed into a mountainside. Sakai had unwittingly killed one of America's first heroes. In early 1942, Sakai rampaged across the Java campaign, downing a Dutch buffalo. On February 19th, he joined the massive air raid on Darwin, Australia. Over 240 aircraft descended on the port. Sakai hunted a P-40E through smoke and exploding ships, finally blowing off its wing. The fighter spiraled into the Timor Sea. Hours later, he attacked a PBY Catalina flying boat. The seaplane's gunners fought back fiercely. Hitting his wingman, Sakai made 6 firing passes, riddling the Catalina's engines until it plunged into the waves. He saw crewmen in life rafts and withheld his fire, a rare act of mercy. By April 1942, Sakai was flying from Le New Guinea. In the brutal air campaign over Port Moresby, he dueled with Australian P-39 Airacobras, whose 37mm cannons could shatter a Zero. On one mission, his aircraft was shredded by .50 caliber fire. Fuel streaming from holes, he glided dead stick over the Owen Stanley Range. Before restarting his engine just above the jungle, he limped home with wings like Swiss cheese. He witnessed close friends blown out of the sky, and the losses hardened him. By midsummer, his score stood at 28 confirmed kills, the highest of any Japanese ace. His comrades called him Heisaku. He was assigned to Rabaul, the fortress. On August 7, 1942, the Americans landed on Guadalcanal. Sakai's air group scrambled to escort Betty bombers. As they neared Savo Island, black puffs of anti-aircraft fire erupted. Sakai spotted 8 planes in a loose V formation below. He radioed, "Enemy fighters!" and dove. At point-blank range, he realized his mistake. They were SPD Dauntless dive bombers, their rear cockpits armed with twin .30s. He pressed the attack, shredding one SPD with a long burst. Then, as he pulled through the formation, the tail gunners opened fire. A .30 caliber round from aviation ordnance man Harold Jake Jones, a gunner from the carrier Enterprise, smashed through the canopy. The bullet tore a hole above Sakai's right eye, exited the back of his skull, and took bone and brain tissue with it. The world dissolved into red, then black. The Zero flipped inverted, diving at 300 miles per hour toward the sea. Sakai hung unconscious, blood pooling in the cockpit. In the freezing wind, he heard his dead mother's voice. "Saburo, don't give up." He forced his left eye open. He was blind in his right eye, and the left eye saw only a watery blur. Blood and spinal fluid caked his face. He pulled back the stick at wave-top height, using the texture of the ocean to keep the wings level. The pain was so overwhelming that he vomited again and again. He tore strips from his flight suit and jammed them into the wound. His left arm and leg were dead weight. He wedged the control stick with his knee. To stay awake, he sang a lullaby his mother used to hum. He navigated by the sun's glare and the faint outlines of islands. After an hour, Savo Island slid beneath him. He corrected his course. He hallucinated ghostly wingmen flying alongside. Once, he passed out and woke to find the Zero in a steep climb about to stall. He rammed the nose down. Hour after hour, he coaxed the crippled fighter eastward. 3 hours into the flight, the green coast of New Ireland appeared. Rabaul was close, but his fuel gauge was on empty. In the final approach, he cranked the landing gear handle with his one good arm, screaming through the agony. The Zero slammed onto the runway at Laconite, bounced, and nearly ground-looped. Sakai cut the engine, unstrapped, and dragged himself onto the wing. He stood at rigid attention before the stunned ground crew, raised a trembling, bloody hand in salute, and whispered, "I have returned, sir. The mission is completed." Then, he pitched forward into a pool of his own blood. Surgeons at Rabaul operated by flashlight. They extracted the destroyed right eye and dozens of bone splinters. They could not close the gaping hole in his skull, leaving a permanent crater. Evacuated to Yokosuka Naval Hospital, he endured multiple surgeries. A silver plate was inserted to protect his brain. For months, he lay in bed, learning to walk again and to see with one eye. The ace who once ruled the skies wept at his reflection, but his will reignited. He practiced flying a trainer with an eye patch, determined to fight again. In early 1944, he badgered his commanders until they returned him to combat. Assigned to the Yokosuka Air Group, the one-eyed samurai climbed into a Zero once more. On June 24, 1944, during the battle for Iwo Jima, he led a patrol of 4 Zeros. They were jumped by 15 F-6F Hellcats from the carrier USS Hornet. Sakai shouted warnings as the American fighters plummeted down. In the swirling chaos, he fired a burst into a Hellcat, saw smoke, then tracked another crossing his nose. He shot it down. He dodged a rain of .50 caliber bullets, slipping into clouds. The dogfight lasted 25 minutes. When he landed, 2 Hellcats were confirmed destroyed and others damaged. Headquarters radioed, "The one-eyed samurai has done it again." By summer 1945, Japan was crumbling. Sakai was ordered to the Shikishima kamikaze unit. He wrote his wife, Hatsuyo, a farewell letter, placing a lock of his hair inside. On August 15th, he strapped into an armed Zero at Omura Air Base. He had already performed the ritual tea ceremony with fellow pilots. Ready to meet death, the engine coughed, but rain squalls delayed takeoff. At noon, Emperor Hirohito's voice came over the radio. Japan would surrender. Sakai unstrapped, climbed out, and knelt on the wet tarmac. He was alive. The bullet that should have killed him had, in a strange twist, saved him from a fiery death. post-war Japan was a wasteland. His beloved Hatsuyo died of tuberculosis, leaving him shattered. He worked as a printer, then a fisherman, the hole in his skull throbbing with every heartbeat. He raised 2 daughters alone, his spirit tested daily. In 1957, he poured his soul into the memoir Samurai with Martin Caden. The book became an international sensation, translated into a dozen languages. Sakai traveled to America, meeting former foes. At a 1986 air show in Texas, he faced Harold Jake Jones, the gunner who had shot him 44 years earlier. Sakai walked up, bowed deeply, and said, "You were only doing your duty." The 2 old warriors embraced and wept. He had found peace. Saburo Sakai spent his final years as a Buddhist lay monk, teaching that war is madness. He spoke at schools, urging young people to reject hatred. On September 22, 2000, he attended a formal dinner at the U.S. Naval Base in Atsugi. After the meal, he smiled, clutching a rice ball in his hand, a symbol of his humble roots. Later that night, he passed away at age 84. His legacy, a man who refused to die, remains a beacon of unbreakable human courage. The one-eyed samurai still soars,